What if I told you that The Simpsons, this bright, colorful comedy that's been making us laugh for over 3 decades, hides episodes so creepy they feel more like nightmares than cartoons? We're not talking about Halloween specials. This isn't Treehouse of Horror. This is an episode that aired like normal, and yet once you've seen it, you'll never look at the show the same. So today we're uncovering the creepiest episode in Simpsons history and finally solving the mystery behind why it haunts viewers. But first, we need to go back to the very beginning. When people think of creepy Simpsons moments, they usually jump straight to the Treehouse of Horror specials. But what many forget is that the show's very first season accidentally gave us something far stranger, and honestly, way more unsettling. That episode was Some Enchanted Evening, the season 1 finale, and if you've ever watched it closely, you know exactly what I mean. Now, the story itself is simple. Marge feels unappreciated by Homer, so she calls into a radiotherapist, Dr. Marvin Monroe, who tells her to confront her husband. Meanwhile, Homer tries to make things right by planning a romantic evening. Sounds harmless enough, right? Just another sitcom plot. But where things get creepy is in the execution. The animation came back from the studio in a state that was frankly disturbing. Characters moved stiffly, their eyes seemed dead, and their proportions looked warped and uneven. Even Marge, usually one of the show's most grounded characters, looked unnatural, as if her face had been pulled apart and stretched back together. Lisa and Bart didn't fare much better. Their smiles would flicker into odd shapes, and at moments it felt like you were watching some early internet creepypasta video rather than a primetime cartoon. And then, of course, we get the babysitter bandit. On paper, she's just a scam artist who pretends to be a sweet caretaker so she can rob families blind. But the way she's presented in this episode makes her feel like something out of a low-budget horror movie. The shadows around her eyes, the way her face twists when she reveals her true nature, and the jagged animation combine to make her terrifying, especially if you happen to see this episode as a kid. In fact, many fans have admitted that the babysitter bandit gave them nightmares growing up. She wasn't supernatural, she didn't have powers, but the uncanny look of the episode made her feel larger than life, almost like a monster that had somehow slipped into Springfield. Even now, if you rewatch the scene where Bart and Lisa are tied up, the uneven animation and the eerie silence in the background give the whole thing an edge that feels wrong, like you're watching something you weren't supposed to see. The strangest part, this wasn't intentional. The Simpsons animation was still in its experimental phase, and the production team had constant issues with overseas studios. What was supposed to be a sweet comedic finale turned into a surreal, unnerving piece of television history. And maybe that's what makes Some Enchanted Evening so disturbing. It's not a parody of horror. It's not meant to be scary. It's a mistake that ended up making the episode Dale more like a fever dream than a cartoon. For many fans, this was the first time they realized The Simpsons could be funny. Yes, but it could also be deeply unsettling in ways no one expected. If Some Enchanted Evening was creepy by accident, Stark Raving Dad is creepy for an entirely different reason. On the surface, it's one of the most memorable episodes of early Simpsons. Homer gets sent to a mental institution for wearing a pink shirt, and while he's locked up, he meets a man who claims to be Michael Jackson. Now, the big twist here is that the voice actually was Michael Jackson.
What'd you say your name was?
Michael Jackson.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Well, have you heard of MTV?
Nope.
Motown.
No.
Beat It.
You beat it.
Or at least partially. Jackson voiced the character, though due to contractual reasons, another singer performed the songs. At the time, this was considered a huge win for the show. Imagine it. The king of pop showing up in a cartoon about a dysfunctional yellow family. It was a cultural moment. But over the years, this episode has gained a much darker reputation. When allegations against Jackson resurfaced in the 2010s, and the documentary Leaving Neverland reignited the controversy, The Simpsons sentient pulled Stark Raving Dad from syndication. That means if you watch the show on streaming or on most TV reruns, this episode simply isn't there, and that's where the creep factor comes in. It's almost like the episode became a ghost, erased from the official timeline, but never erased from people's memories. Fans still talk about it, still upload clips, still debate whether it should have been removed, but the removal itself gave it a haunted aura, like something too dangerous to acknowledge, even though millions already saw it. Rewatching the episode today, you can't help but notice the odd tone. Homer being locked up for something so trivial feels surreal. His interactions with Michael have a dreamlike quality, especially since the character is portrayed as kind, gentle, and almost saint-like. And in hindsight, that portrayal makes the whole thing feel uncanny. Knowing what we know now, it's like watching two layers of reality clash: the innocent comedy of the 1990s and the unsettling truth revealed years later. For younger fans who never saw the original broadcast, Stark Raving Dad has become almost mythological. They've heard about the lost episode, but they can't find it on official platforms. Some even stumble across poor quality uploads online and wonder why the show pretends it doesn't exist. That sense of forbidden media only adds to its creepy reputation. And then there's the music. Lisa's birthday song, written by Michael, is one of the most heartfelt moments of the series. Yet knowing the controversy behind the guest star, it hits differently now. It feels tainted, eerie, like a reminder of something we're not supposed to revisit. So what was once a lighthearted, star-studded episode has transformed over time into something much darker. A piece of Simpsons history that feels cursed, a ghost episode that lingers in fan art, but is deliberately hidden from the show's official legacy. And maybe that's what makes Stark Raving Dad one of the creepiest Simpsons episodes of all time. But creepy Simpsons moments don't always come from bad animation or ghosted celebrity cameos. Sometimes the unease creeps in quietly, through stories that feel just a little too real. And nowhere is that more obvious than in The Day the Violence Died. This season 7 episode doesn't rely on horror imagery or surreal animation mistakes. Instead, its creepiness comes from its tone, its themes, and the unsettling way it wraps up. At first, it seems like a clever satire about the entertainment industry. Bart and Lisa discover that Roger Myers Jr., the head of Itchy and Scratchy Studios, might not actually own the rights to his most famous creation. Instead, a forgotten man named Chester J. Lampwick claims he invented Itchy the mouse decades earlier. Lampwick isn't the kind of quirky old man you'd expect in Springfield. He's bitter, scruffy, and deeply cynical. His clothes are ragged, his eyes are sunken, and his voice has this hollow quality that makes him feel like he doesn't belong in a cartoon at all.
In fact, I invented the whole concept of cartoon violence. Before I came along, all cartoon animals did was play the ukulele.
He's less of a comedic side character and more like someone who wandered in from a depressing indie drama. And that's exactly what makes him so unsettling. Once Chester proves his case in court, Itchy and Scratchy Studios collapses. Everyone loses their jobs. The cartoon disappears from television, and Springfield is left in a strangely quiet, humorless state. Watching the Amur fall apart isn't funny. It's bleak. The animation lingers on, characters looking hopeless, unemployed, and defeated. For a show built on chaos and laughs, this sudden drop into despair feels almost sinister. Fans often point to Chester himself as the source of the episode's off-kilter vibe. He's not played for comedy, the way most guest characters are. Instead, he's written as this oddly realistic figure, a man who was wronged by the system, but who takes no joy in finally being proven right. His bitterness overshadows everything, leaving the story with a taste of hopelessness. And then there's the ending. Rather than finding a clever resolution, the writers essentially admit they don't know how to wrap things up. Out of nowhere, the episode ends with a parade celebrating a random constitutional amendment. It's jarring, disconnected, and bizarre, almost like the writers were saying, yeah, we didn't want to leave you in that dark place, so here's something silly instead. But the whiplash only makes the episode creepier. It feels unfinished, broken, like a joke where the punchline never comes. Over time, The Day the Violence Died has built a reputation as one of the strangest Simpsons episodes ever made. Not because of blood, monsters, or cheap scares, but because of how empty it feels. It's a story about forgotten creators, injustice, and the collapse of something beloved, told in a way that leaves the audience unsettled. By the end, you're not laughing. You're staring at the screen wondering what you just watched. And maybe that's why this episode lingers in fans' memories as one of the creepiest of them all. Not every creepy Simpsons episode is about shadows or scandals. Sometimes the fear comes from a place we all recognize, something fun and safe, suddenly turning into a nightmare. That's exactly what happens in Itchy and Scratchy Land, the season 6 episode where the family visits a theme park that quickly becomes a horror show. On the surface, the setup is pure comedy. The Simpsons travel to a Disneyland-style park, dedicated to the hyper-violent antics of Itchy and Scratchy. The parody is sharp, the rides are ridiculous, and at first it feels like a classic family adventure. But as the episode unfolds, the cheerful facade starts to crumble. And that's where things get unsettling. The turning point comes when the park's animatronic characters malfunction. Suddenly, the cute mascots with their big smiles and cartoon eyes aren't just part of the show, they're dangerous. They begin stalking and attacking the guests, their frozen grins making the whole thing even more disturbing. It's a clear nod to movies like Westworld and Jurassic Park, but seeing it play out in the Simpsons world gives it an uncanny edge. Think about it. Springfield is supposed to be a safe space for chaos and slapstick, but in Itchy and Scratchy Land, the chaos turns lethal. The family is trapped in a brightly colored nightmare, chased by machines that were designed to entertain but now want to harm. The juxtaposition of bright, goofy characters committing acts of violence is what makes it so creepy. It's horror hidden under layers of comedy. Even more disturbing is how the episode leans into the idea of technology gone wrong. This wasn't just a one-off gag. The Simpsons predicted the rise of our uneasy relationship with machines, theme parks relying on animatronics, humans trusting tech to keep them safe, only for it to backfire. Watching it today when stories of malfunctioning AI and robots feel a little too close to home, the episode's horror hits even harder. And then there's the imagery. The Simpsons wandering through empty, broken-down attractions while being hunted by smiling, lifeless robots has a surreal quality. It's the kind of imagery you don't forget because it feels like a nightmare. Something so familiar, yet so deeply wrong. By the time the family finally fights back and escapes, the relief is real. But that doesn't erase the lingering thought. What if a place designed for fun suddenly turned against you? Itchy and Scratchy Land turns that fear into a comedy. Sure, but beneath the laughs, it's one of the creepiest scenarios Springfield ever found itself in. Now, we've looked at real episodes that made The Simpsons feel like a nightmare, but we can't talk about creepiness without mentioning one of the strangest urban legends to ever come out of Springfield, Graggle Simpson. If you've seen the thumbnail for this video, you probably noticed him tall, lanky, with oddly shaped features that look almost like they belong in the Simpsons universe, but not quite. That's exactly what makes Graggle so disturbing. He feels wrong. Here's the truth. Graggle Simpson was never a real character. He didn't appear in any official episode. He wasn't part of Season 1-5 or any lost script hiding in a vault. Instead, he was invented by fans online who photoshopped him into classic Simpsons scenes and spread the idea that he was an erased family member who the show tried to delete from history. The meme caught fire because of how convincing it looked. In doctored screenshots, Graggle blended just enough with the show's style to trick people who weren't paying close attention. And since The Simpsons has been running for over 3 decades, the idea of a forgotten character didn't seem that far-fetched. People started speculating that he was a cousin, a long-lost brother, or even an abandoned prototype of Homer. The unsettling part is Graggle's design. His body is long and awkward, his skin a strange shade of yellow that doesn't match the rest of the family, and his face stretched into an expression that's almost human, but just off enough to feel uncanny. Looking at him gives you that same weird discomfort you get when you see a distorted cartoon or an AI-generated character that almost looks real, but not quite. Fans online spun entire creepypastas around him, claiming he was erased from the show because he unsettled test audiences, or that he was part of a darker storyline that Fox buried. None of it is true. But like any good urban legend, the mystery took on a life of its own. Today, Graggle has become part of Simpsons lore, despite never officially existing, and that's what makes him so creepy. He's a ghost character, a product of the internet's imagination, that wormed his way into the show's history, and now lives rent-free in fans' minds. He's proof that sometimes the scariest things in The Simpsons aren't even real episodes, but the stories we create around them. From the warped animation of Some Enchanted Evening, to the ghost-like removal of Stark Raving Dad, to the bleak tone of The Day the Violence Died and the theme park nightmare of Itchy and Scratchy Land, The Simpsons has delivered plenty of creepy moments. And then there's Graggle Simpson, an internet myth, so convincing it feels real. What makes these stories so haunting is how out of place they feel. A comedy built for laughs suddenly dips into something darker, and that contrast is what sticks with us. So maybe the question isn't which episode is the creepiest, but why does Springfield sometimes feel like a nightmare when the laughter fades